Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, which is the Introduction to Occupational Therapy at St George's University of London, the UK's specialist health university. So my name is Lanisha, and I'm the Events Officer at St George's, and I will be your host for today. The format of this event will be as follows. So we will start off with a presentation about the course, which will be delivered by Sarah, the admissions tutor. And then you'll have the opportunity to hear from two current students that are in their third year on the course. We will then finish up this webinar with a live Q&A. So in this Q&A, we will answer the questions that some of you sent through in your online registration form, and also any further questions that you may have sent during the course of this event. So there's a chat box pane on your screens, probably on the right-hand side. So you can use that chat box to send in any questions that you have while this event is running. And we will endeavour to answer all of these questions during the Q&A. If there are questions that we are unable to answer, you will be responded to via an email within the next few days, and we will get the answers out to any unremaining questions. So just a little bit of housekeeping. So if for whatever reason your connection fails, please do try to log back in. We will still be here continuing with the webinar. If for whatever reason you're unable to log back in, we are going to record this session, and everybody that has registered will get a video link emailed to them tomorrow. If for whatever reason my connection fails, I will try to log back in as quick as possible, so please sit tight. If for whatever reason I am unable to log back in, then one of my colleagues will take over. So at the end of this webinar, there will be a survey that pops up onto your screen. So we'd be very grateful if you could just take a few minutes out just to fill out that survey and just give us some feedback. And finally, at the end of the webinar, for all of you that are still here with us, because you are unable to get down to St George's and we're unable to be there to give you a tour of our campus, we have a campus tour video that we can show you at the end of this webinar. So if you are with us at the end, we will play that video for you, and it's about 5 minutes long. So thank you for listening to me, and I will now introduce Sarah on to give her presentation. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. So hello, and a very warm welcome to this session. Thank you very much for taking the time to come to the session and for your interest in occupational therapy. As Lanisha said, my name's Sarah. I'm one of the senior lecturers in occupational therapy, and I'm also the admissions tutor for occupational therapy. This feels quite strange, doing this talk like this online. We're used to doing this face-to-face during an open day on site. So I'm used to being able to see you, which I prefer, to be honest. But I suppose we've all had to work a bit differently with COVID. So I hope that the session will answer some of the questions that you might have about occupational therapy. And I'm so pleased that we have two of our lovely occupational therapy students here with us today, both called Stacey, although you don't have to be called Stacey to do occupational therapy, but hopefully between us we'll be able to answer the questions you might have. So I'm not going to talk for very long because we'd like to have time to answer the questions, and I know you'll want to hear from the occupational therapy students who are here as well. But what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk very briefly about occupational therapy as a career, because it's a really exciting career, great career, even though I'm biased. I'll talk about it as a career. And then I'll talk about the BSc Occupational Therapy program at St George's and briefly talk to you about the entry requirements and where you can find out more information about that if you'd like to know. Okay, so just for a moment, just to think about what we mean by occupations, if you could just think about all the things that you've done so far today. So you might think about different things like, I don't know, getting your kids to school, having lunch, getting dressed, doing whatever your school work or whatever the work was that you did as part of your job. And then if you just take a moment to think, do you think that it would impact on your health and well-being if for some reason you couldn't do those daily activities? So those daily activities are what we call occupations. So they're the daily activities that are important to people, the daily activities that people need to do or that they expected to do that bring meaning and purpose to their life. So that might be self-care activities like perhaps getting dressed or eating, might be leisure activities that people do for fun or hobbies, or it might be productivity like schoolwork or work as part of your job. So occupational therapists enable people to do the daily activities that are important to them. So it's a really practical and hands-on profession that enables people to participate in those activities that really matter to them. So it's about overcoming barriers to enable people to do the daily activities that are important to them. So just a little bit more about occupational therapy as a profession. It's a very person-centered profession. So the person is always very much at the center of everything that we do. Occupational therapy is concerned about promoting health and well-being through occupation. And it's the only health profession that promotes health and well-being and people's quality of life through occupation. So that people can participate in those daily activities that are most important or most meaningful to them individually. And to do that, occupational therapists might work with people individually, or they might work with groups and populations of people. So I've just put in this little quote here because I suppose it captures the essence, I think, of occupational therapy as such a person-centered and strength-based profession. Occupational therapy practitioners ask what matters to you, not what's the matter with you. So when might someone need an occupational therapist? Well, when there are problems with daily occupations, problems with doing daily activities, and that might be because of a whole range of different reasons. It might be because the person has a physical illness or disability, or it might be because of a mental health illness or disability, or it might be related to the person getting older, or a whole range of different barriers in their environment. So the occupational therapists will work with a very broad range of people with physical and with mental health needs. Where do occupational therapists work? Well, occupational therapists work in very diverse settings. These are just some examples here of some of the places where occupational therapists will work. People often think of hospitals, and it is true that occupational therapists do work in hospitals, but it's a lot broader than that. So many occupational therapists will work in the community, perhaps going to see people in their homes or in care homes. Many will work with children or young children in nurseries and schools or specialist children's centres, in private practices, charities. They may work in prisons or in developing areas of practice like with refugees or disaster survivors. So it's a very broad range of settings where occupational therapists work and are increasingly working in newer areas of practice. So what do occupational therapists do? I'm just going to talk about this so briefly because I think people probably want to know about the programme at St George's and the entry requirements. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this other than just to say that, as I've said, occupational therapists work with such diverse ranges of people, from preterm babies, toddlers and children, all the way through to end-of-life care, and people from all different backgrounds and circumstances with a real range of physical and mental health needs. They may, and occupational therapists work locally, nationally and internationally. How occupational therapists work with people? Well, as I've said, it's a very strengths-based profession, so we look very much at what people's strengths and skills are, what it is that they really want to do, or what it is that's really important to people individually. We consider their roles, so perhaps their roles as a mother or a student or a worker, and the routines and what it is that person wants to be able to do or is expected to be able to do. assess their needs, work together with that person to develop goals for intervention, and carry out interventions to enable people to do the activities that really matter to them. So why become an occupational therapist? Well, these are some of the reasons that we put together that we think are good reasons to become occupational therapists. Well, you can help people to engage in their most meaningful occupations. So it is a really rewarding career where you are able to make a real difference to people's lives and the quality of their life through enabling them to do what's most important to them individually. It's the only profession, it's the only health profession that uses occupation as a therapeutic tool. And as I've already said, when you've trained as an occupational therapist, you are qualified to work in such a diverse range of settings in the UK and internationally. Occupational therapists have a complex understanding of the importance of occupation on people's health, well-being and quality of life. And if you've looked at NHS jobs, I'm sure you will know that as an occupational therapist, your career prospects are excellent. There are loads of jobs out there for you as an occupational therapist. So why St George's University? You could study occupational therapy at various different universities in the UK and internationally, but some of the points that make St George's different. St George's is the UK's only university dedicated to medical and health science education, training and research. So all of the programs at St George's are health science related and medical. I don't know if you've been to St George's University. If you've visited there, you'll see that it's on the site of St George's Hospital. So there's a nice, quite a vibrant atmosphere there. And there's a strong emphasis on interprofessional learning. So when you're on the occupational therapy program, you will have a lot of opportunity to work with students from other programs, because you will do interdisciplinary modules during each year of the program, where you'll work with students, for example, from physiotherapy, paramedic science, radiography, and medicine. Some other reasons to study at St George's is that it's a smaller university, and on the occupational therapy program in particular, we have smaller numbers of students compared to other occupational therapy programs at other universities. And one of the advantages to that is that students and lecturers can get to know each other pretty well, so there's a good student-staff ratio. We have an experienced teaching staff, so all of the occupational therapy lecturers have worked for many years in practice and in very diverse areas of practice, like trauma and orthopedics or mental health or children and families. So we all bring different practice and research experience to teaching. If you have visited St George's, you probably won't have seen this, but for the teaching rooms for occupational therapy, we call the Art of Living Suite. And it's set up with equipment like occupational therapists would use in practice, like a home environment. So there's like kitchen equipment, there's part of it that's set up like a mini kitchenette, and part of it is set up with bathroom equipment, like adapted bathroom equipment, so that students can practice the skills that they'll need before they go out and practice on placement in safe environments with guidance from a tutor. And the program's accredited and approved through the Healthcare Professions Council and the Royal College of Occupational Therapists. Other reasons to study at St George's is that your prospects, employability prospects are excellent. 100% of graduates are in work or further study 6 months after finishing their degrees at St George's. And from our occupational therapy graduates from last year, 85% of them had jobs at the time of their graduation, which is really excellent, we think. This is just a picture of some of our occupational therapy students in the occupational therapy room during, I suppose, what would be like a typical teaching session. So there's a big emphasis on hands-on learning, learning through doing. So a lot of group-based discussion and interaction in learning. So the BSc Honours Occupational Therapy Programme at St George's is World Federation OT approved programme. You qualify to practice when you finish the programme after your 3 years of study on the programme. And there are 1,000 hours of practice placement that are included within the programme over the 3 years. So course overview, it's a 3-year full-time programme. So there are 3 terms in the academic year of about 9 to 12 weeks in each year. So it's approximately 6 to 20 hours teaching per week, plus your own study time. You will do lectures, tutorials, small group work, and you access all of your learning through the virtual learning environment, which is really the main way that you access all of the learning materials. And then, as I've said, there are 1,000 hours of practice placement in total over the 3 years. So these are the modules. I'm not going to talk about them in any detail, but just to say these are the modules in year 1. The ones highlighted in green are the interdisciplinary modules. So those are the modules that you'll do with students from other programs. And the modules that are in blue, Foundations of Occupational Therapy and Occupation for Health and Wellbeing, are the occupational therapy specific modules of year 1 that you will do with other occupational therapy students. And then there's 1 practice placement of 4 weeks in year 1. Then in year 2, these are the modules that you'll do. So the one in green is interdisciplinary, so you'll do research methods with students from other programs. And then the 3 in blue are, again, occupational therapy specific modules, where there's more of a focus on occupational therapy intervention in the 2nd year. So enabling occupational performance, human occupation across the lifespan, and occupations in context. And then you'll go out on 2 practice placements of 8 weeks each in the 2nd year. And then finally in the 3rd year, and both of our occupational therapy students on this webinar today are in 3rd year. So there are 2 interdisciplinary modules again, and you do your research project as part of one of the modules. And then 2 occupational therapy specific modules, and then you do 1 practice placement of 8 weeks in year 3. The placements that you'll go on in each year of the programme, we have a very broad range of practice placements that you could go on. These are just some examples that are written here. This isn't by any means all of them, but some examples of palliative care settings, children's services, eating disorder units, community learning disability teams and community mental health teams, acute trusts, mental health trusts, and there is also the possibility of an international placement. We haven't yet sent a student on an international placement, but that is something that's possibly been slowed down a little bit because of COVID, but we are fully intending to establish that. And then also role emerging placements, which are newer areas of occupational therapy practice. So like, for example, students have gone to Vauxhall City Farm as part of a role emerging placement. The learning styles, as I've said, all of the modules have a practical component. So there's a big emphasis on learning through doing. You will do some of the traditional lectures, but a lot of the learning involves hands-on learning through doing and a lot of discussion. so there's a lot of opportunity to work kind of together with your peers and in small groups. We also often involve occupational therapists from practice as guest lecturers, particularly if they work in specialist areas. So we often have guest speakers coming to speak to the students on the modules and also service users. The support with learning, I'm not going to talk about this because this is massive. St George's offers so much support to students, and you can find more about this on the St George's website. But just to say that we have a personal tutor system where every occupational therapy student will have one of the occupational therapy lecturers will be that student's personal tutor throughout the 3 years of the programme. And we try to keep, as much as we can, we try to keep the personal tutor consistent. And that's really like your first point of contact for any issues that you might have, whether that's issues with study or personal issues. There's the Academic Success Centre, which can support with academic writing and referencing. There's the library and the counselling service, to name just a few examples of the support available. Then lastly, the entry requirements for the occupational therapy programme. So we look at academic, non-academic, and you also do an interview as part of the admission process. I've put at the bottom of the slide the website. That's the course page for occupational therapy, and on that you will be able to find all of the entry all of the entry criteria for all of the courses that we accept, because there's quite a broad range of them, you'll see. But I've just given some examples here of the academic entry requirements. So GCSE or the equivalent level 2 study, we require maths, English and science at grade 4 or C or above. For level 3, that's like A levels or the equivalent of A levels would be a BBB. And then we accept a whole range of different level 3 qualifications and above, which you can find on the website, like, for example, access courses, degrees, foundation degrees, IBs, BTECs, and more. So, as I said, if you want to, it would be good to look at the website if you wanted further details on the individual qualifications that we accept. And then in your application, you will also write a personal statement, and you're also asked to have a reference, who might be a reference from your school or previous study or an employer. And you will also have an interview. And in that, we're looking for evidence of a commitment to occupational therapy and some understanding of the scope of occupational therapy. So, you know, you need to have an idea of, or be able to express why you want to study occupational therapy and know a bit about what occupational therapists do and where they work. But you don't need to have very much knowledge about occupational therapy as such, because you will learn about that on the programme. The interview is really assessing the key values that you would need to work in health and social care. So things like communication, teamwork, respect and dignity, and the questions are scenarios that assess those key values. And then you also have a police and health check. Right, I've definitely spoken probably over the time that I was allocated for this, so I hope that might have answered some of your questions. That's my email address on the slide, and please do email me anytime if you have any queries, or even if you'd like to just, I'm more than happy to just give you a quick ring to talk through anything that you would like to know. I very much like to be able to speak to people, and it would be great to speak to you rather than having to, this all feels a bit remote trying to do it all virtually. But if you just make a note of my email address, I would be very happy to take any questions at any point from any of you. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. That was very informative. So Sarah will join us again Once we've heard from our current students, she will join us on our Q&A panel to answer the questions that you guys have. Okay, so now we will introduce our student life panelists. So we have two third-year students, both named Stacey. And as Sarah said, you don't need to be named Stacey to study on the course. But we have two panelists named Stacey that are going to talk to you for about 5 minutes each about student life as a student at St. George's. So first, I would like to invite Stacey Hunt to join us.
Lovely,
Hello,
thank you. Hi, Lenisha, thank you.
Hi,
That very nice introduction.
You're welcome. I'll leave you now.
Lovely. Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm just going to go through, I mean, Sarah did a great job talking about the course. I'm going to go through, I suppose, a bit about being a student at St. George's and how I got there. So as Lenisha's said, I'm in my third year now, so final year. I actually lived in Australia when I decided that I wanted a career change. So I was working in the charity sector. I'd been thinking about it for quite some time, and I wanted to do something really person focused and working directly with people. I knew a couple of occupational therapists and just learned more about the job through them, and it just sounded like the right thing for me to do. And I was very lucky, went through the process of applying for various universities, but liked St. George's the best. And I got a spot on there, so I was incredibly grateful for that. So I moved back from Australia and I moved to London. And for me, it was the first time living in London. So it felt quite big. Having never lived in London before, that can feel a bit overwhelming sometimes. I actually moved into a shared house across the road from the university, which was quite helpful. So I was in Tooting itself. So I guess I want to start by telling you a bit about Tooting as well, because it's a really great area. If you did want to actually move in at kind of out of home and into London, Tooting is definitely a good spot. Probably best bits for me about Tooting, it's 20 minutes from central London. So you've got the beauty of kind of easy access to a real interesting life in London and to appreciate the lifestyle of London, but also you can get out of the hustle and bustle. It's got the Tooting market's probably the main thing you may or may not have heard of, but it's actually quite world renowned. I think it was in the UK Lonely Planet for being one of the best places in the UK. In the daytime, it's a typical London market. At night time, it opens up and there's fantastic food, pop-up bars. It's just a really, really great experience. And also, as I can see in the picture here, there's really nice parks as well. So if London, again, can feel a bit overwhelming sometimes, loads of places in and around Tooting to escape to where you can just sit in a park and really relax. So I was really thankful that when I got to London, it was a great experience and I loved living in Tooting. I suppose the other thing for me was the fact that I was a mature student. So I'm 36, so perhaps a bit older than some of you listening today, or perhaps not. But for me, it was quite a big decision to go back to university full time. And there's always that worry, I suppose, for everyone, you know, am I going to meet friends and whatever else? But I was expecting that I would probably be the oldest person there, which wasn't the case. It was really, really varied age of people. And I think with a career like occupational therapy, often you actually come to it a little bit later in life anyway. So I've met completely wonderful people on my cohort, some of which will be friends for life now, and some of which are my age or older. So I think my expectation there was broken in a good way. There was me worrying that I'd be the oldest person there, and it's not the case. Really broad range of ages, which was great. And I've just kind of included a few photos here of the things that I've done through St. George's. There's so many opportunities away from just kind of the academic aspects. It's a fantastic course in that sense. And as Sarah said in her presentation, there's opportunities to work with physios, and radiographers, and you know, kind of a very unique way of learning where you can work with other allied health professionals and learn what they do as well. But the other side of it are these opportunities that you get where you can do really hands-on learning. There's a picture of us there learning to use a hoist, a picture of myself and someone else from the cohort, a friend of mine, who the two of us went up to Birmingham, and we went to the Royal College of Occupational Therapists annual conference, which was just a fantastic experience and not something I thought I'd be able to do as a student. So all these things are brought forward. Certainly the OT team, the occupational therapy team, and the lecturers are really forthcoming with these are kind of extra things you can be doing if you want to, which I've found to be absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I think that's probably it from me. Personally, it's been by far the best decision I've ever made. And I know you've probably got a lot to think about and a lot of decisions to make, but wherever you are at in that process, best of luck to you. And also, if you do have any questions, I'll be sticking around for the Q&A at the end as well. So I'm happy to ask any answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your insights, Stacey. And as she said, we will see Stacey again in the Q&A session at the end. So next, I will invite Stacey O onto the screen to talk to you a bit about student life from her perspective. This Stacey's camera isn't actually working at the moment, so that you'll hear her and you'll see a picture of her on the screen. Okay, Stacey, are you there?
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I would love to show my face, but unfortunately my camera's not working. So here's a lovely picture of myself. Just like Stacey, I'm just gonna discuss a few things about my life so far as a student and just how much I've enjoyed being a St. George's student. So the first thing, moving to the next slide, is why I chose occupational therapy. Just to echo what Sarah said at the beginning of her presentation, I realized that I really enjoyed anything that's related to healthcare. At the time when I was making a decision to do occupational therapy, I was working as a GP receptionist and administrator. So I was very curious, like a patient will come in and they'll have like a back pain. I'm like, oh, how come they've got a back pain? What can I do to help? I'm like, you're just a receptionist. So I think that sort of curiosity was what made me think, actually, I want to do something with healthcare. And then I started researching, and I thought occupational therapy just allows me to have that, health knowledge, and also be able to actually step in and support patients in their recovery journey. So yeah, so that's why I love occupational therapy and other things. The other thing that I also wanted to talk about, like Stacey, I guess I was a mature student. It's really weird because when I started the course, I think I was 23, and I'm 25 now. But I think when you get past 21, you're classified as mature. So I actually took the opportunity to live in Horton Halls, which is one of the Horton Halls is basically the student accommodation run by St. George's. So it's all so if, for example, you're thinking about moving into Tooting and then you're worried about where am I gonna stay, you've never rented before, I would advise to go for Horton Halls. In Horton Halls, I really enjoyed living there. I was lucky that I was placed with fellow allied students. So one of the my cohort was actually my flatmate, which was really good. It was really good. And then I had within my flat, I had fellow physio students as well. So choosing accommodation Horton Halls, it actually offers you an opportunity to just to get to know other students. And if you're lucky, you get placed with someone on your cohort or someone who is like an ally student as well. And then when it comes to assignments, you get to share ideas and support each other, because that's what I found when I was living there. And in Horton House is actually not that far from the university, so it's like a 10 minutes brisk walk. I always sort of left the house quite late, so I actually gave myself like 5 minutes to walk and run to class. But yeah, I think that's the great benefit of it. You're living so close to St. George's University, so if you need anything, it's just a brisk walk to St. George's. I also thought it might be helpful to just discuss my tips on learning, because again, the last time I was in formal education was in 2016, I believe. Yeah, 2016. And then I was starting a course in 2019. So it was quite a bit of a gap for me. And some of the things that I found helpful in my learning was that because all the content for teaching is online, we have an online login called Canvas. You can log into, you can look in advance what the lesson's going to be about, have a flick through the PowerPoint presentations, and do some research on your own. So a really good tip for me was actually going online in advance to the lesson, looking at what was going to be taught, doing some activities related to the lesson, and then actually making a note of questions that I had, because obviously as I'm learning, certain questions pop in my mind and I make a note of it, and I actually go in that lesson with my questions. So when as the our lecturers are teaching, if there's a moment for questions, I just use the opportunity to ask the questions that I didn't understand from my own learning. And I found it really productive, that it helped me to really be someone who's active in my learning, to really take charge of my own learning. Something that I found really helpful and I've been using throughout my years as a student is setting up my own timetable. So what I do is that I have a timetable of all the lessons that I have, and I set it up in advance for like a month or two, and I refer to it each time. So when I wake up in the morning, I check, okay, today I've got this lesson and I'm going to do this activity in response to this lesson. It helps me to actually plan my day, and I sort of have take it off as I do each lesson. So then at least I have that inner confirmation that, okay, I've done the reading that I need to do, and I've yeah, so yeah, so that's just my tip for learning. Additionally, I am on this new platform that St. George's have, which is Unibuddy. So it's just an online sort of chat platform. So if, for example, after today, as you have any questions that you want to ask me, you can just go on to Unibuddy, which is on the St. George's website, and actually just post your question to me and I'll respond. Additionally, there are other students on there using the platform as well. So if you have you want to also chat with a different student doing the occupational therapy course, you have access to that as well. And or if you just want to chat to any student on studying at St. George's, for example, medicine student, physiotherapy student, then that facility is there as well. But I will be here at the end for the panel, so you can ask questions then as well. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you very much, Stacey, for that insight from your perspective. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we will go into the Q&A. So I would like to invite all staff and students back onto the screen, please. And we will kick off with questions that were sent through with your registration forms. Okay. Okay, so first question. So if you asked a question on your registration form and the answer would have been covered in Sarah's talk, I won't repeat that question because you already would have got the answer from her talk. So somebody wants to know about the prospects in pharmacology.
Pharmacology?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's been directed to the right place. Maybe that should have gone to, that's not related to occupational therapy.
Okay, maybe I have noticed in quite a few of the webinars, people always ask if there's a way to get into pharmacology, maybe with this degree. So I guess it's about checking the entry requirements specifically for pharmacology and seeing if they would consider an occupational therapy degree.
Do you mean if you've already got an occupational therapy degree? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I think what they're trying to ask is if they study this course, could they then get into pharmacology? So I get that with quite a lot of these webinars on our different courses. But one thing I guess I'd like to highlight is the courses at St. George's prepare you for a specific career. So if it is pharmacology that you're wanting to get into, then maybe look at the requirements for pharmacology with whatever institution you wish to study at, and just aim to meet those requirements.
Yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
rather than studying one of our degrees to get into something else. I think that's
that would be quite a hard way to get into pharmacology. If you wanted to do that, there are much easier ways than doing a whole degree in occupational therapy, for sure.
Most definitely. Okay, somebody asked, how much is a lack of biology and psychology knowledge a disadvantage?
So we don't actually ask for any specific subjects for level 3. So like for A levels or the equivalent of A levels, the subjects that you take don't matter. At GCSE level or the equivalent, we do ask for a science subject. So you need to have science somewhere. If you haven't got science, we ask for it at GCSE. If you don't have it at GCSE, but you do have it at level 3, whether that's A levels or an access course, that's fine. But you do need some background in science because, yeah, some of the modules, particularly one that you do in the first year called Essentials for Allied Health Professionals, has quite a lot of anatomy and physiology in it. So you do need to have some background in that at GCSE level.
Perfect, thank you. Would you be prioritized if you have a science A level when applying?
Oh, that's a good question. No, not as such, because as long as you meet our level 3 entry requirements, you would be offered an interview. So you wouldn't be prioritized as such. We don't require any specific subjects for level 3, but as I said, you do need a science subject. But if you've got that at GCSE, that's fine. But yeah, if you meet the entry requirements for level 3 at BBB or the equivalent, whether or not you've got science at level 3, you would still be offered an interview. So yeah, I hope that answers that.
Thank you. Are the placements that you do on the course paid?
No, they're not paid. It's part of, so we organise the placements for you. Your travel is paid, so you'd need to be able to travel to the placement, and we try to make the travel time as short as we possibly can for you, but it is possible that it could be up to 2 hours. I mean, we look at the area that you live in and reimburse you for your commute, but the actual placement isn't usually paid. There has been, related to COVID recently, you might have read that there has been the opportunity of some paid placements, but that was very much linked to the pandemic, where we did have some occupational therapy students doing paid placements quite recently. But generally, the placements that I've spoken about that you do over the course of the programme, so the 1,000 hours that you do, are usually not paid. It's part of your training. So you will be, you'll have a practice educator on placement who'll be an occupational therapist working in the setting, and a link tutor who will be one of the occupational therapy lecturers from the university. So it's very much a learning experience, and you'll be assessed as well. So there's practical hands-on assessment while you're working in the placement setting, according to our assessment criteria and assessment paperwork. So it is very much part of your training. It's a sort of practical context-based part of your training, as opposed to doing the modules and sitting in lectures. So generally not, but there has been one very recently that has been linked, but it's been linked to the pandemic.
Okay. And Stacey, do you want to just give us a little insight into what it's been like on placements so far for you?
Which Stacey would you like?
I'll just.
Oh, sorry, Stacey, go on, after you.
You're going to have to specify your Stacey, Ladisha.
That's right, I will. We'll start with Stacey.
I wanted to just add to what Sarah was saying. Unfortunately, placements are not paid. It's just, I think you have to consider it similar to what you can get in terms of financial support is the NHS provide, I think it's called NHS travel bursary. After you've gone to your placement, you can submit a refund. So you need before you go to placement, you need to make sure that you keep all your receipts for your travel, and then you submit at the end of the placement, you submit an application with your attached receipts, and then they will refund the difference between your travel to St. George's and your travel to placement. Also recently, there is something called the NHS Learning Support Fund. That also provides a bit of extra financial support to NHS students and allied health students. So I would advise you to have a look at it and look at the eligibility criteria for that. It's called the NHS Learning Support Fund. In terms of placements, so far I've been on 2 placements. My first placement was on an inpatient brain injury ward, and then my second placement was an inpatient ward for people with autism. I'd say both of the placement went really well. I think it's just, in a way, it challenged me in the sense that I had to take what I've learned in lessons and actually apply it to a raw case. That's in lesson we're talking about what we can do with the client and what we can't do, and what we say to the client and what we won't say. But on actual placement, the client is right in front of you. They've got a real life problem. You have to be very proactive and practical and say, okay, I'm gonna do this. But then when you say you're going to do this, we've got to remember that you have to do it with the patient consent and with all the evidence that shows that what you are advising is going to actually improve the patient's well-being rather than make them even more unwell. So I think that's the challenge of it. But at the end of the day, it is quite fun and it's a very valuable experience, I would say. Okay, I'll stop talking.
Thank you. Okay, Stacey H, anything you want to add to that?
I couldn't agree more with Stacey O. The placements I've had, I've felt incredibly lucky. So my first one was a paediatric placement. My second was on an intensive care unit. And my third one was actually quite innovative, I think, for St. George's. We did an online virtual placement. And it was a peer learning placement. So that was a new concept just because of COVID. And at the time we couldn't go out on placements. We actually did something that was completely online. And it was fantastic. It was just it was a slightly different learning experience, but a really good learning experience. And I think, as Stacey says, it's as valuable as the learning is when you're in the university and you're in your lectures and your workshops. You literally cannot get any better learning than being put on a ward. And fantastically supported, always supported. You're never left on your own. But you just learn so much in those 4 weeks and 8 weeks. So the placements are probably the best bit of the course, to be honest. They're fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much for your input there. Is there a chance of being guaranteed a job, I guess, on completion of the course?
Gosh, I thought, well, when you have graduated, you are qualified to work in any area of those diverse settings, and there are just loads of jobs out there for you. As I said in the presentation, 85% of our third years from last year had jobs before they graduated. They hadn't even graduated when they had jobs. So you just have to look at NHS jobs. The UK is screaming out for occupational therapists. There's a national shortage. So yeah, your career prospects are fantastic as an occupational therapist. We need more occupational therapists.
Thank you. Is there a part-time study option?
There isn't at the moment. No, it is a full-time program. It's a full-time 3-year program. So there's not a part-time option at the moment.
Thank you. We've covered this already. Could you give an indication of what the timetable or weekly timetable looks like, or what contact hours could kind of look like during a typical week?
Yeah, should I answer that, or should I answer that?
Yeah, you can answer if anything else the students might want to add after if needed.
Yeah, so it is full-time, so Monday to Friday, and I would think of it as being, roughly 9 to 4. Possibly some days could be. It depends a bit on the modules that you're doing at the time. So, but think of it as being a full-time program from Monday to Friday. And then when you go out on placements, you'd be working about 37.5 hours a week. So, and the placement hours that your practice educator would work in that setting. So like 8 till 4 or 9 to 5. And it's pretty much, I mean, there are a few exceptions, but we would think, there's a few settings that might work weekends on placement, but, we think carefully about whether or not that's possible for you with your home, the individual home circumstances that students have. So I'd say generally, I mean, it's a full-time program and thinking Monday to Friday and pretty much a full day, but there might be some differences depending on the modules that you're taking at the time.
Perfect. Okay. We've got 2 more questions from the registration forms, and then we'll tackle the few that are left to be answered that were sent in during the webinar. So these ones should be pretty quick. One is, are there many changes to the course due to COVID-19?
Yeah, there are. So at the moment, we're actually teaching online, which is new for all of us. So we are delivering all of the modules online with really minimal on-site sessions. We have very few on-site sessions for what really is essential to be taught on-site. So like last week, I was on-site doing the pre-placement week with our current second years. So they have to do like manual handling training as part of that. So that's very difficult, probably impossible to teach online. So we go in very occasionally for that, but the vast majority of the teaching is being delivered online at the moment, just to keep people safe and socially distanced. But we are intending for the learning to go back to on-site when it's safe to do so. And we did have some placements that were cancelled during the first lockdown. But now, I mean, we're in the second lockdown, and currently our second years are all out on placement, and we didn't have any issues with placing them. And as Stacey mentioned, we did have a virtual placement, which was new and innovative, like Stacey said, which is also because of COVID. So it was a way of students being able to get the placement experience that they needed with the COVID restrictions that were in place.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just add to that, sorry, Lanisha, I was just going to say as well, because I think as I can only imagine what's going through people's brains when you've got this expectation of coming to university and there's a worldwide pandemic going on. It is different, and there's no doubt about it, but I think the support that's been put in place with the online learning has been exceptional. And my experience when the kind of reaction to COVID-19, when I got this opportunity over the summer to do a virtual placement, was very positive. So rather than kind of thinking, oh dear, what are we going to do? It was like, what are we going to do? Let's think about this. And actually it was a very valuable placement in its own right. So I would say, you know, we are all together in this really weird time, but St George's have been great so far at, you know, supporting everyone and making that online learning still very valuable and interesting.
Awesome, thank you for that.
Can I add something, please?
Yes, sure.
So just to add to what Sarah and Stacey have already said, for what I find from my experience of being like a St George's student, and especially an OT student, is that lecturers are always looking for feedback. They're always asking, okay, well, we've done this, how do you want to improve it? Do you think it's okay the way we've done it? So I think that's one thing that I really like about the course. You're constantly being asked, what can we do to improve this? I'm not saying that things are really bad and that's why they're always asking, but just that question alone is really helpful, because it means that they're always changing things to better suit that particular cohort. Because I think what the year before us, who are now graduated, the way they did their own teaching and style of teaching was done to suit that cohort. And for us, we've come in, yeah, we're in third year, certain things are standard, but our opinions still matter, and they're still adapting it so that it's more suitable to the majority learning style. So I guess in a pandemic where you're thinking, where should I go? I'll probably go with somewhere where you're constantly being asked, what do you want and how can we help with your learning? So yeah, that's what I can add.
Thank you very much for that, Stacey. That was very useful. So we're coming close to the end of the webinar, but we don't have too many more questions to go through. So if you guys can hold fire for a few extra minutes, then we should be able to get through all of your questions. So the next one is about personal statements. What type of things would you expect to see in a personal statement, Sarah?
Really a commitment to studying occupational therapy. So why do you want to study occupational therapy? Why do you think you've got the skills to be an occupational therapist? Or what experience do you think you have that might be relevant to that? It might be experience that it doesn't necessarily have to be work experience. We know that it can be really hard to get work experience, particularly now in the pandemic. But really it's why do you want to study it, and why do you think you're good to study it, is the main thing. It's a commitment to wanting to study occupational therapy. Okay. And that might be from your personal experience of caring for a family member, or group activities that you've done while you were at school where you've worked as a team or communicated, you've got communication skills, you're empathetic, you want to care for people, you want to help people. That's essentially what we're looking for in a personal statement.
And so if somebody was applying for multiple courses and they maybe had an interest in, let's say, medicine or maybe a radiography as well, would that put you off of considering that person?
It would, no. I mean, you can write about skills that are transferable. A lot of these skills are relevant to different health professions, aren't they? You want to care for people, help people, work as a team, improve people's health and well-being. That could apply to medicine, radiography, physiotherapy. I wouldn't say it would put me off at all. But it would be good. It is really good to see in the personal statement that you mention occupational therapy and that you are committed to that, that it's not actually that you wanted medicine and you'll do occupational therapy if you don't get into medicine. We want people who really are motivated and want to become occupational therapists.
Thank you. Stacey Hunt, is there anything you want to add to that about personal statements?
Yeah, I mean, Sarah's summed it up quite nicely, but I think I would say I can only speak from my point of view, but I remember feeling quite overwhelmed, thinking, oh my goodness, I have to write this personal statement. It's a big bit of work. It's vital. It's really important. And I think try not to look at it as this big scary thing that you have to write. Try and look at it as an opportunity to sell yourself, which can be very hard. Sometimes we sit there going, well, what have I done that anyone, cares about? But you will have done something. Think about things you're proud of. Think about successes that you've had. And if they can relate directly to occupational therapy, that's great. But actually, it might be your attitude towards things, and it might be the fact that you overcame something or you worked as a team. So I would say don't look at it as a big scary thing. Actually look at it as an opportunity just to really sell yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. It's not a big thing. It shouldn't be taking you ages to write this. We will absolutely read it, but it goes together with the entry requirements. The personal statement's part of it, the reference is part of it, and the interview is part of it. So it's not a huge thing to be spending a lot of time on it. You should be able to read it and try and make it not have spelling mistakes and things in it as well, but it doesn't have to be very long or detailed. Just it should come across why you want to study occupational therapy, and we should get from it that you really do want to study occupational therapy. That's, I suppose, the most important thing.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Is it possible to have any input or requests into the placement setting you go to? So like if they wanted to go to pediatrics or mental health or something, do they get?
Yeah. So we do need to make sure that you get the right experience that you need to qualify. So over the 3 years, we place you in different settings. So you would need to have experience in a physical setting and experience in a mental health setting, and then also experience in an acute setting and a community setting. So that's what we need to so if you couldn't just have all physical experience or all mental health experience, because you need to have that. There aren't electives as such where you we're also working with the offers that we have available. So the different organizations will make offers of 1 or 2 or 3 occupational therapy students who they can have, and we can only place in terms of what we've got. So we first of all have to make sure that you have the experience that you need to be competent to practice when you graduate, and we need to work with what we've got. So I'm sure that if the placement leads know that you're desperate for a particular placement, and it's possible to place you there because it's available and because you've had the right experience that enables you to go there, then that might be considered. But having said that, the example given of working with children tends to be what loads of people want, and we often only have a certain number of it. Although I think most years there are offers of placements working with children, whether that's in schools or children's centres or the Evelina Hospital or wherever it may be, that does tend to be hugely popular. So generally you are placed by the placement team, but quite a bit is taken into consideration, like I said, like where you live, the experience that you've got, the placements that we have available.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. Just a few more to go. What's the exam coursework ratio like for the course?
So you only sit 1 exam over the 3 years of the programme. So at the moment, there's just 1 exam that you sit in the first year. The assessment, so every module will have assessments, and we use quite a variety of assessments. So that might be, the assignments might be written essays, there might be case studies, there might be presentations. So there's a range of different assessments. that you would have kind of over the course of the academic year, and every module would have 1 or 2 assignments.
Okay. And how big is the cohort every year? And are you able to give a rough idea of how many are, or what proportion is mature or school leavers?
So this year for this intake that we've just had in September 2020 for year 1, we have 29 students, 29 home students and 1 overseas student. And of those students, 10 of them already had degrees at the time that they, I have no idea whether I'm supposed to just be giving this information out, but yeah, about a third of them had done other study, and so perhaps they were choosing to a change of career, or so I suppose that gives you a bit of an idea that a third of them had done other sort of university-based study, and so it's a real mix of mature students and students who come straight out of school. It's very diverse. I think that's one of the strengths of the student groups is the diversity. Very diverse in terms of backgrounds, different backgrounds, and we're getting increasing number of men on the program, which we all, there is a national shortage of men in occupational therapy, and we're really wanting to increase that. And we're so pleased to see that we have got very decent numbers actually on each year. So it's still predominantly female, but we are getting increasing numbers, and a very good, respectable number actually in the first and second year, well, each year of the program, which is great.
Perfect. And we've got one final question, which is there any additional funding for the degree, or for the cost of the degree from the NHS? Now, I believe from this year, there's an additional £5,000 for every year from the government. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, and you can find that is, if you go to the course page on the website, it gives you information on that. And if you scroll right down to the bottom, it explains to you how to apply for that. So it's not applied for through St George's, but it does give you the link to apply for that. But like I say, if you do have any problems or have any questions, we'd really welcome them. Like Stacey said, go onto the website, you can talk to the students on UniBuddy, or I'm hoping you will have access to my email address as well through the PowerPoint that I think you're all going to get tomorrow, aren't you, on the webinar. And please get in touch with any, if you're struggling with it, finding anything like that, let us know. But it is all on the website, and it is there for,
Perfect. Guys, thank you so much for your useful information, your insight into the course and your experience. It's been very useful. And thank you to the audience for staying with us up until this time. So what I'm going to do now, for those of you that want to stick around and watch the campus tour video, I'm going to play that for you in just a few moments. But those are not that are not going to stick around to watch it, please do take a few minutes out to fill out the feedback survey that's going to pop up on your screens as soon as you exit from this webinar. Sarah, Stacey H and Stacey O, you're welcome to stay with us if you would like to watch the campus tour video, but obviously it's a campus that you've seen already. But I do thank you guys so much again for your input into this event.
Yeah, and thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to watch this. And please do get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you, and we really hope to meet you all at some point in the future.
And remember, the deadline for application is the 15th of January 2021. So do get your applications in, ready for that deadline. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all again for staying with us to the end, and we look forward to hopefully receiving your applications. Take care and good night.